Welcome back everyone. In today's video, we're going to go over some of C# syntax and get into some code today. If you're new here, my name's Colton and I need to learn C# for my upcoming internship this summer. We're going to be following C# 12 in a nutshell instead of C# 10 just because it's the latest release, and you can go find that over on O'Reilly Media with a subscription. Typically, if you're going to university or something like that, you could already have an active subscription included in your tuition. I find the best way of learning is through teaching, so that's why I'm making these videos. This learning series is going to assume that you have programming knowledge, but it's not necessary. Like I said, we're going to be covering some syntax today. So we're going to write the hello world program, just your very first program, and then we're going to break it down a little bit. We're going to go over like what it looks like to have import statements, which in C# we use using. We're also going to talk about how we can use some variables. And then we're going to go into some methods. And then after we talk about methods, we're going to talk actual hard syntax. So what are the identifiers in C#? What are the keywords? And what does a literal look like? Let's start off by writing our hello world program. All right, let's break this down a little bit. Let's look on the broad scale of the statement and narrow down. So C# executes all of its statements sequentially. So if I had another statement just like this under it, we would first run this statement and then go to line 2 and execute that one. Every line in C# ends with a semicolon to denote this is the end of the statement. And then at the very beginning here, we have system. This execution statement is using the system namespace, and system is just a collection of all these classes that can interact with the system on a lower level. Within the system namespace, we are accessing the console class. A class is just like a custom data type that has been defined. We'll go over making your own data types or classes later. And within this console class, we're saying, hey, we have a method called writeLine, and writeLine takes a string argument, which then gets printed to the screen. And as you can see, the conventions in C# are a little bit different than what we have in, let's say, C or Java. Over in Java, we don't use this kind of convention for writing our methods where we have a capital letter beginning at the start of the method. Instead, over here in C#, everything is like title case is the best way to put it. Anyway, so if we go and execute this statement, we'll see all the way down here that it reads hello world, exactly what we asked it to do. One question you might have is do I have to write system.console.writeLine and then whatever I want printed to the screen every single time you want to print something? No, not necessarily. We can go ahead and import the system namespace. So if we go ahead and take out system here, and then go to the top and say using system, this is going to basically say, hey, take a look and index at the system namespace and gather all those resources. And then later on, when you need to use anything from system, you can just go ahead and directly call any of the classes from within it. So now we can just say console.writeLine hello world. What if we wanted to print some sort of variable instead of printing hello world every single time? Well, as long as we have a variable declared up above somewhere, we can go ahead and just insert it directly into the console writeLine statement. How we define a variable is just by saying, here's its data type, then we give the variable name, and then we use the assignment operator and then pass in whatever should be there. This is considered a literal, and so is 10 in this context. Just to reiterate, we're saying that I'm having an integer here that is named x and it's going to be assigned to the number 10. So if we go ahead and run this, we'll get Colton printed out. But we don't have to necessarily pass in a string to the console writeLine. If we just pass in x instead and then run, we'll just get 10 printed out. This automatically does a type conversion, if you would say, and prints it out to the screen for us. What if you wanted to pass multiple strings into the writeLine method? Well, we can just use string concatenation. So if we go down into the writeLine method and just do animal1 plus animal2, we'll go ahead and see that it prints out cat dog. Now, you have to remember that this is not going to insert a space in between the two variables. You must explicitly state, hey, I want to have some sort of space in between them. So you just do the double quotes and then put a white space in between, and then you must concatenate that to the next variable. So if we run this again, we finally get that cat space dog. Next, let's kind of turn this into a method. If I wanted to print 2 animals every single time, I would need to go ahead and define an animal 1 and then an animal 2 and then write console.writeLine. But what if I wanted to do this n times? Our program would be super long. So instead, let's turn this console.writeLine method passed in with 2 variables into some sort of method. As you can see here, we still have our 2 variables, animal1 and animal2, but now we've defined some method called printAnimals using the title case. This void before the method name is saying we're not going to return anything from this method, meaning we're not passing some value back up to whoever called me. Instead, we're just not going to do anything. And so over here after the name, we have string animal1 saying that we're taking in as our first parameter some sort of string and we're going to call it animal1, and then the same thing over here for animal2. It's a string and that's what we're going to name it. And then we just call the console.writeLine method, which is going to go ahead and do the work for us. So down here, if we just call printAnimals and then we pass in animal1, arguments do not need to have the same parameter name as it is up in the method. So you just pass in animal1 and then animal2, and then let's see what gets printed out to the screen. We get cat dog, and see now this is super repeatable. This isn't the best example or anything like that because usually you're having more computation being done in methods, but just for the sake of brevity, here we can go ahead and call printAnimals 3 times and we're going to get cat dog printed to the screen 3 times. So cat dog, and cat dog. Now let's go ahead and identify what the identifiers are in C#. Identifiers are basically anything that gives a class name, a method name, a variable, anything like that that is identifying some piece of data or class in C#. So over here, system is an identifier for the namespace system. Animal1 is identifying a variable, same with animal2. Over here, printAnimals, it's a method name, and so therefore it's an identifier along with the parameter names. Console and .writeLine are also identifiers. You get the deal. But what about keywords? Keywords are basically anything that you cannot use as a variable name in C#. So I cannot have a variable named using, and I can't have a variable that's just named string. We get a compile error. Same thing goes for void and any other data type that you're going to try to use as some name. If you want to bypass this rule, we can go ahead and create a variable called as such. So if I had an int, let's say just using for some example, we cannot say int using equals 10. We're going to get some sort of error. But instead, if we prepend it with an @ symbol, we can go ahead and use this as normal. But by convention, don't really do this. Just kind of create your own names when you're naming a variable. Lastly, we have literals. Literals are basically anything that is hard-coded into your program. So over here we have cat, which is hard-coded into animal1. Same thing for dog. And then down here we have 10 is equal to the using variable. You should typically avoid having hard-coded values unless these values are something that won't ever change. So something like pi or the speed of light constant, stuff like that. And one more thing before you go, comments. Comments allow you to write comments in your code to explain what is going on. So if I wanted to say prefix at to a keyword to make it a variable, we can just write 2 forward slashes, and then therefore this line will not be executed when you're running your program. But what if you have some super long comment and it needs to span multiple lines? We can just go ahead and do a forward slash and then a star, and then to end this, because anything after this will be a comment, we need to end it with a star and then another forward slash, and then we can go ahead and have our own variables and other things being executed afterwards. So there you go. That is pretty much the basics of our C# syntax. If you learned anything from this video, please consider giving a thumbs up and subscribing if you want more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.